want to welcome you back to Infotec 2017 here in Omaha. I'm here with John Rossman. He was our keynote speaker this morning, and we'll have an interview ahead for the next few minutes. John, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for welcoming me. Great audience here today at the AIM Infotec conference. So
yeah, fun.
Real pleasure.
Give us some details about you, just the personal stuff. Where are you from?
Yeah.
What brought you to Omaha? Have you been here before? Those kinds of things.
Yeah, perfect. So I haven't been to Omaha. I live in Southern California, but we actually just relocated there from Seattle, Washington about 6 months ago. So I'm new to Southern California, but real pleasure and honor to get to come to Omaha and talk about innovation.
Yeah, welcome to the Midwest. Not the prettiest time to be in the Midwest. In a couple of weeks, the flowers will be coming out, and it's super pretty, but we're glad you came out. You're a keynote speaker. You talked a lot about Internet of Things. You had 10 items you wanted to walk away. When you think about what you really wanted to communicate in your keynote, the one or two takeaways that you wanted people to walk away with, what do you think those would be? What did you want to impress on people?
Well, I think that you do technology to drive a business outcome, right? And that's everybody's job and role, and everybody should be in tune with, why we're going to do this project, or why we have this technology, or why we're going to create something. And teams like to skip through as fast as possible kind of that upfront articulation aspect. You can call that strategy, you can call that, requirements. And what I learned at Amazon was really focusing on getting to clarity was super important, A, to get the best idea, but also to B, make sure that we all understood it. Because if you all understand exactly what you're trying to accomplish, then you can work more independently, the project will go faster, you'll have far fewer issues. And you're also able to make projects smaller. And that's one of the keys. Like, you hear a lot about, the agile mindset and minimally viable product. If you don't get to clarity on exactly what the outcome or the user experience you're trying to create, then you can't build the minimally viable thing. And and so that is probably one, which is, you have to work hard at understanding the business problem you're trying to address.
Yeah, you were previously at Amazon and you learned a lot of that, and I saw a lot of that in examples. When you think about what Amazon is doing and maybe the best example of that, can you kind of walk us through what they've done and how you see that happening there?
Yeah, so I was at Amazon. It's been a long time, but the lessons and the techniques are extremely impactful, and I've just gotten the opportunity to kind of help tell that story. And I think on the aspect of like how they iterate on things, I mean, I talk about the example of the dash button, right? And the dash button actually started as another device. It was called the Dash Wand.
Yeah, no, that I did not know. That was great little intel.
Yeah, and it was a beta product, meaning limited in nature. And for whatever reason, my guess is just adoption, Amazon didn't really proceed to scale with that. But what they did learn out of that was this simpler branded button called the Dash button. And today there's hundreds of those Dash buttons. And where you see them taking that then is really embedded Dash buttons where items can reorder themselves, replenishment orders based on actual usage. So Brita, the water filter company, is doing that. And so I think that notion of trialing and starting something, seeing how adoption, seeing how use works, and then continuing to be able to press forward, Amazon does in so many things.
Yeah, you mentioned a pilot project that's going on with DHL and
Audi and Amazon, right?
in Germany,
right,
where they're looking at delivering a box to your car. I know I can get my windshield replaced, I can get my car washed, or I could get my oil changed in the parking lot, but apparently they're working as well as getting a package delivered. From a security standpoint, that seems a little risky for a lot of people. Don't you think giving someone access to your vehicle so they can put a package in it's a little scary?
Well, but it's done in a very secure way. One-time electronic fob or able to enter it. You can have complete tracking. It's a trusted carrier and all of that. I actually think the alternative is you have something delivered to your doorstep, right? And if you think about like the incredible crime that's going on because more and more packages are sitting on doorsteps unattended, so there's been this real spike in kind of doorfront crime, right? Of taking lifting packages, right? And so everything in this world is about trade-offs,
Right.
you know what I mean, right? And the key is you just have to, the benefit has to far outweigh the risks and the costs relative to it.
Yeah, that has spurred its own industry when we think about a Ring doorbell, or when we think about some of these security devices that now people are installing on their porches, just so they've got some security around. And then think about the facial recognition.
Intended security. I wonder, like how actually secure the impact that those things have, because at the end of the day, you can't stop somebody. At the end of the day, law enforcement doesn't have the resources to pursue those types of incidents. So
Yeah.
I really wonder. I think you got to just avoid those things, not catch them.
Right. Yeah. Or you talked a lot about disruption and really changing the way a customer thinks about what they need, and sometimes even discovering needs they didn't know they had. So oftentimes we think of innovation as just new gadgets, right? But it's more than that. Can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned in those 10 keys that you had, you talked a lot about the customer. When we think about disruption, what are the really important parts to that maybe we're not getting right in the industry?
Well, not every company is going to, do what famous companies like Apple have done and just, reinvent customer experience. But you always have the opportunity to improve the customer experience. You always have the opportunity to operate better, shorter cycle times, better quality, better costs, all of those, inventory management type of aspects. And that's where, there's kind of this concept of small I innovation, which is just doing incremental things. But when you get into that mindset of continually thinking about those little things, sometimes big ideas will come to you. And I think my best piece of advice is always think about the customer experience and always think about your place as bigger than just exactly where you operate with that customer or exactly where you operate within the industry. And if you understand the upstream and downstream aspects of that industry and of that value chain, and work hard at truly understanding both the customer experience and the industry dynamics that are going on there, you'll come up with better insights.
Yeah, you had a slide that said think big,
but start small.
Start small.
Right.
Can you talk talk through that a little bit?
It's important to have a theory in your mind of like, hey, what this could be at the end of the day. But that's not how you go about building something, especially if it's could be a really big thing. You start by doing something small and learning and getting customer feedback, and then building on top. That is the agile mindset that we hear so much about. We hear about these concepts of minimally viable product. And most companies can't afford big bang monolithic programs and projects without incrementally getting there. And so while it's important to understand the journey and what the end game might be, you need to be testing that every single day and trying to release product as often as possible.
Yeah, you had also mentioned in that innovation process that metrics are important, right? Ideally, you want to be able to measure that every step of the way. I think sometimes we miss that in innovation, and we think just about getting a product out there. How important is measurement from your standpoint as far as?
Well, I can tell you at Amazon, how you are going to measure something, the metrics requirements are as important as the actual feature requirements are, and probably get more scrutiny than the feature requirements. And so they cannot be triaged. They can't be pushed out, and everything. And that's because if we can't measure something, we don't know what the customer experience is going to be, and we won't be able to measure it, and we won't be able to iterate on top of it if we're not getting the right customer feedback. And metrics and data is how we get most of our customer feedback. And so they spend more time thinking about their metrics than any company I've ever seen. I think it's a big piece of their sauce in both terms of how they get to be operationally excellent and drive innovation.
Yeah, I think the Franklin Covey organization says start with the end in mind. You had also mentioned a user story, and that Amazon went about before it even got started. You would almost do this press release like style. How important is being able to tell that user story up front before you've even created the product to get people thinking about it? How important is that?
Well, I think it's vital, because if you can't articulate, why is this important to my customer, my user, whoever it is, and if you can't demonstrate deep insights into what you want to improve for them. I call that empathy, right?
Yeah.
Like deeply understanding and caring about what's going on for them. Then I think you're in a weak position to either ask for resources or be able to explain it to others. And so, we spent an immense amount of time, really gaining clarity, and we focus on the customer first and foremost.
Yeah, no, I love that user story idea of really almost celebrating like this is the future of what's going to look like. And we're not guessing, this is exactly what we want it to be. And then driving towards that story. I'm sure it pivots though as you learn, right? As you're going through, there are probably, as you're working and you're learning, that user story pivots.
None of these things are intended to be rigid, right? And you want it. You're intentionally doing these things in a way to be learning and to get more feedback.
Yeah.
But you do want to be conscious about if you are making a significant change, like, okay, stop. Like, we're on the verge of making a change here. Is this intentional or is this accidental? So you do want to be intentional about that.
No, it's great. I love that technique. That may be one I do more of. I'm pretty good at communicating that, but I'm not very good at writing it down. Right. And I think maybe that discipline of sitting down in a one-pager, the press release concept. So that's good. Can you talk a little bit about your current role and your current company? What are you doing right now? And
so I'm a partner with a professional services firm called Alvarez & Marcel. It's a worldwide firm based out of New York. We're a performance improvement company. So we help our clients tackle the hardest, most unique opportunities and challenges in their business, and we bring experts relative to that. And so what I typically get to work with my clients on is kind of digital capabilities, and where either it's in development of their strategies, or they're obviously kind of in the digital journey, but they need to figure out how to scale it and how to do more of it and how to combine it with their existing businesses. And so that's where I work with a lot of my clients on, is some aspect of digital scaling.
Yeah, that's great. And you're an engineer. Your background as an engineer. Yeah. When you look ahead, when we think about robots are the real deal. Drones now are the real deal. AI and machine learning is now the real deal. Voice recognition, the real deal. When you look at those technologies, what do you get the most excited about when you think about maybe the next 5 years? What technology that's out there right now you think is ripe for just kind of breaking out in those areas?
Well, I think what you're seeing break out right now is machine learning and using algorithms to automate decision-making processes, right? And so what I personally get excited about is, how do you take back office capabilities and work that really has gone untouched in like how the work actually gets done for a very long period of time, and like, how do you actually do the math for that decision? Like, what would be the formula for what decision, and how to help people make better, faster, real-time decisions through better data, better math, better algorithms to it. And so I think that application in the back office is very real. And you're seeing a lot of companies, especially, companies that measure and evaluate risk a lot, are really at the forefront of putting algorithms into their business.
Well, think about self-driving cars.
Right.
Self-driving buses have become a thing that I'm starting to see in deploying, buses in a city, and they're on their own, right? There's some really interesting, and that of course is risk management. Is all that really huge risk management problem, right?
That's right.
You've written a book. Let's talk a little bit about it. First of all, I want to know, that's a huge endeavor.
Yeah.
Why write the book, and what were you hoping to accomplish with it?
So the book we're talking about is The Amazon Way on IoT, 10 Principles for Every Leader from the World's Leading Internet of Things Strategy. And it's actually my second book. My first book is about the leadership principles of Amazon.
So you wrote a second one even after learning the lessons of the first one.
and the first book about the leadership principles, I started writing it like 7 years after I had left Amazon. And these were just the stories and the anecdotes of Amazon that I saw so impactful with my clients. And so that was a pretty easy book, because I was well rehearsed on like what those were. This book on IoT was a completely different experience for me, because I really had to think through, and I intended to write a book just about how IoT can impact your business, and like, how do I think through the roadmap for doing that? But every example I started to come to kept coming back to, well, Amazon does that, and Amazon does that. And so I go, my brand is around Amazon and taking the learnings from Amazon and helping other businesses and leaders understand how to apply those in their business. I'm just going to tell these principles through the lens of Amazon. But my goal was help a reader answer the question, what should my Internet of Things strategy be? And so I go through both like what the exemplars are, the patterns of how to use IoT, as well as then what's the techniques that we would use at Amazon, like building a future press release that we would use to quickly build our strategy. And it took me about a year. I was fortunate. I got some time to work on it and everything. But it was a really fun experience, and it's not perfect, and it certainly isn't the end story on IoT. But I think it does, in a unique way, help a business person answer that critical question, which is, how can IoT impact my business?
Yeah. And as leaders, what do you think is the number one thing that, we think of leaders around the world? What do we struggle with the most? What's the biggest problem?
Well, in business, it's like when something like this, Internet of Things come up, most business leaders go, you need to talk to my tech guy, and everything, right? Every business leader, this is business, today. Every business leader needs to understand the concepts and as much of the basic plumbing technology, dig into it deeper than maybe your natural orientation. Because the days of you being able to turn to your IT person and go, can you get something like that done, are over, and everything. These are integrated projects. They're about business change and creating business value. And you can't just turn to your IT leader to ask them to get things done. These are inherently change initiatives, and leaders need to lead change.
Yeah. So the Amazon Way on IoT is the name of the book. Available on Amazon,
of course,
I would imagine, and available Kindle. Did you go the whole route?
Paperback, Kindle, audio, Audible, MP3, CD, you name it.
Do you get much feedback from your readers? As a podcaster, we get feedback all the time. Do you get feedback? What kind of feedback do you get from your readers?
Yeah, so I get feedback both in terms of reviews written at Amazon or written at Goodreads. And then I purposely put my email on the back of the cover because I love to hear from people. And I get a nice email every week about either like, hey, you got a little correction you could do here, right?
Don't you love those maximizers?
Great, honestly. But it's usually about like, you bring up a real interesting approach or anecdote or way of thinking about something, and it's impacted how I think about something. I got an email a couple of years ago from a lady who runs a set of orphanages in Africa, and she was having to scale her management team. And she just said how my first book, The Amazon Way, just gave her a new perspective on how to scale her team and her management process. It's like, I never expected to have that type of reach or feedback and everything.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
When you get those, we at Gallup, we produce a podcast that we push out all around the world, and I get emails from Romania and South Africa and all over Asia, and it's kind of fun to get that kind of instant feedback. We live in a pretty amazing world when we think about those kinds of things. And so, John, anything else as we think about future technologies and scaling? You said scaling a ton.
Yeah.
Right. That seems to be the challenge, right? Is how do we take our business processes and then how do we scale them out? If you were to give a leader maybe one thing to watch for that maybe where they're not scaling property, what would they look for, or what kind of symptoms would they look for?
What most organizations, the mistake they make, they go, in order to scale something, do more on a year-over-year basis, we're just gonna, hire up more, and everything, right? And at Amazon, like, that is the definition of a business that doesn't scale. And so you need to think through, like, what investments do I need to be doing now so that next year I can do more of it, but be more efficient about it, right? And that means, on a cost per unit basis, whatever your unit is, you're more efficient at it. And so thinking through purposefully, how am I going to scale something year over year? Like, that's ingrained in you as a leader at a company like Amazon. And I think most leaders miss, like, I have to be figuring out how am I going to inherently change the way that work gets done, make it automated, make it self-service, make it more obvious, make it more user-friendly so that it takes less effort, less cost to do more of it next year.
Yeah. You had mentioned Amazon Go, which I'm very fascinated with, and that first store has rolled out, but maybe as they're rolling more, that maybe in it itself has a little bit of a scalability issue, just in making sure, because it's tracking a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, anything
Well, there was just some news yesterday about I think in their pre-beta that they've had some scaling issues, right? So when they get, I think the article I read was like more than 20 customers in the store, it starts losing the ability to understand exactly that customer and some inventory tracking. But that's to be expected.
Yeah.
I personally go no big deal at
Yeah.
all. And that is the nature of true innovation. And that's what Amazon is doing, is they're not making any big commitments about it. They're saying we're going to roll out one and we'll take however long it takes to get it right before they start scaling. And I think not making big commitments internally or externally around, when you're truly doing something new, how we're going to roll it out. Like, you've got to be able to have the right patience.
Great. Well, John, thanks for taking a few minutes. Thanks for coming to Omaha and
Absolutely.
speaking
Real
to us.
pleasure.
Pleasure to meet you as well, and thanks for the time that you've put in.